Welcome to Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. This is where the subjects are audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Jo Reed, and with me is contributor Alan Minskoff. Hey, Alan, how are you?
I'm good.
And so your theme this week is family issues. First of all, what made you choose that theme? And then what books are you talking about?
Well, I think we chose the theme because it ran through these three very different audiobooks, and it made sense to approach them, at least in part, with this in mind, because they're all familial stories and they're very, very different. One is nonfiction and two are fiction.
Okay, and what three books are there?
The first one is The SPINACH KING by John Seabrook, and it's read by Dion Graham. The second is On Isabella Street by the Canadian novelist Genevieve Graham and read by Liz Leafloor and Erin. And the third is among my favorite American writers. It's So Far Gone by Jess Walter, and it's read by the inimitable Edoardo Ballerini.
We will start with The SPINACH KING by John Seabrook, read by Dion Graham, who can read anything.
And he certainly proves that with this. It's an earphones winner and deservedly so. This is John Seabrook's family that he writes about. If our listeners don't know, John Seabrook is a very well thought of New Yorker writer who writes about culture. And he's been struggling with this familial story of his grandfather and probably more importantly, his father, who were extraordinarily successful vegetable growers and frozen food kings in southern New Jersey.
But we shouldn't think that they were farmers, because they really weren't. They were innovators and managers and hustlers.
Yeah, I mean, they of course started out as farmers, and then their great innovation was with frozen food and distribution. And his grandfather was dubbed the Henry Ford of agriculture because, as you said, they were innovators technologically. But here's the rub: the family had deep-seated kind of WASP bigotry, and they had employees who were African Americans who weren't treated well, and Japanese Americans who weren't treated well, and Seabrook is unflinching. He looks at the history as it is. His dad is a very different character. His dad, who actually was fired from the company business, went on to have a successful business life and other endeavors. But what's most interesting about him is his dad is like a high liver. He drives a horse and carriage. He has a wardrobe that no closet can fit. All his clothes are handmade, and he is a very flamboyant man. He dates one of the Gabors. This is the inheritance that John Seabrook, who goes to Princeton and then ends up at the New Yorker, but is a freelance writer for many years. He has this inheritance, and he's sort of confronting the racism of his grandfather and the kind of flamboyance and, I should say, almost high WASP life of his father. His father's really removed from him.
Yeah, his father's a bon vivant, and what they both have in common is an emotional coldness to their family.
No question. And that's at the heart of it. And let me talk a little bit about Dion Graham, because this is a really finely narrated piece. I said in my review that he gives a bravura performance because these are fraught relationships, and it's not an easy kind of story to tell. It's an audiobook that is challenging. There are three generations of fathers and sons. There's this very fascinating relationship that the author has with his wife and with his own demons. You learn that John Seabrook also had a problem with alcoholism, and he confronts it. It makes the audiobook very personal and intimate, and it also gives you a chance to say, John Seabrook, you took this on and you were completely honest.
Well, why don't we hear a little bit of Dion's narration? Let's set this up for us.
Okay, remember, there's a piece that is with simply John and his life, and here's where he meets his wife.
This is The SPINACH KING by John Seabrook, and it's read by Dion Graham.
I met Lisa at Manhattan Ink magazine in the Gray Bar building in 1988 when she was assigned to copy edit a piece I'd written about Dan Quayle's golf game. She looked like my mother at her age, that same dark Irish coloring. Maybe that explains the suddenness of it. But what I came to love about Lisa was her integrity, her generosity, and her concern for the poor. Lisa's parents had raised her to be compassionate to those less fortunate. In my family, comparisons with people less fortunate than us were intended only to reinforce how much cleverer the Seabrooks were. In her family, love came first. In mine, accomplishments seemed to take precedence, and love came further down the line.
Well, that's quite an account of the Seabrook family just in those, few lines. But Dion's narration, he is telling us, he is not reading this. What always strikes me about Dion is that he is equally at home in fiction and nonfiction. He just moves so easily, and he's just a master of this art.
What I love about him is he can do that intimate tone and that phrasing that really emulates a very talented writer in this case. You get the sense of the tone, which is very personal and intimate, and also the phrasing of the words.
So that is The Spinach King by John Seabrook, read by Dion Graham, with sort of a succession of frozen food in some way. And your next one is on Isabella Street, which is quite different. Tell us about this book.
So this is historical fiction. This is why this is sort of a fun day. We have the history and nonfiction and historical fiction in Canada. This is a Canadian take on the period of the Vietnam War, and it's written by Genevieve Graham. It's read by Liz Leafloor and Erin Moon. Liz Leafloor reads one of the main characters, who is a psychiatrist living in Toronto, and the way these two characters meet is they live on the same floor on Isabella Street, and they are both dealing in very different ways with the turbulence of the era. There's a huge scene where the psychiatrist is on the outside and the other character.
Who's the other character's name?
The other character, Sassy Rankin. Thank you very much.
Sassy Rankin.
Sassy Rankin's kind of a rebel. She's perfect for the Vietnam War. She's a guitar player, a folk singer, and these two become great friends, even though they're very, very different.
Now, Marion Hart is the psychiatrist, and she's the child of a plumber.
She is, and she has succeeded extraordinarily. And Sassy Rankin is the daughter of a very successful realtor. What is fascinating is that realtor and that plumber served in World War II together. And there's a secret that they share, and that's most important to the plot of this historical novel.
Does the point of view shift between the characters? Sometimes it's Sassy's point of view, sometimes it's Marion's?
Absolutely. If I didn't say that, it does shift, and it shifts often, and it's very smoothly and well done. And of course, having two different narrators, two different, readers really helps in that way.
And this one in earphones.
It did, because these two women, what's important, you're dealing with a Canadian novel. And I think you could have had a wonderful actor do it who was an American, but you would have missed that little intonation of the outs and the Canadian, pronunciations, but you don't. These two are both Canadians, and the inflections throughout by both Leafloor and Moon are excellent.
And this is Leafloor's second narration of a novel by Genevieve Graham. She also did At the Mountain's Edge.
Right, and Genevieve Graham is a very successful novelist. This is not her first turn. She's someone who's successful and very well thought of. The other thing that they do, which is fascinating, it is set in Toronto, and the Vietnam War protests are in Toronto, and all the other characters are in Toronto, but the Marion character goes to Vietnam. She goes to Vietnam and has a remarkable experience there, and she comes back, and there's a remarkable scene toward the end where everything is revealed, and there's kind of some nice comeuppance. It's a very well structured and written ending, too.
Well, why don't we listen to it and set this up?
This is really a definitional piece. It's going to tell you about the time, who's doing what, where, and when.
We're hearing from whom?
We are hearing from Liz Leafloor.
Okay, so here is On Isabella Street by Genevieve Graham.
The 1960s were all about change, and that was even more noticeable this year. For someone like Marion, quietly studying within the walls of the university, there was so much to observe. All over the world, eager young fists grasped at fresh ideas and opportunities while shaking with disapproval at the man. All will be solved, those young people swore, through peace, harmony, and free love. If only they didn't have to make a living.
She sort of captures that optimistic and naive time at the same time. But the quality of her voice is just lovely. It's so resonant.
Oh, I think she does an excellent job. There's also some medical scenes here. You follow her through her residency, and she deals with some very, very disturbed people. And that is part of the power of this historical fiction.
Well, given the breadth of this book, how is the pacing?
It's very good. I mean, I think that it works because, remember, you're going from very intense scenes of war protest to hospital scenes, because there's a whole subplot about hospitalization of sick people during that period, things that happened there and in the United States.
But the heart of it is about this intentional family that these two women form, as different as they are.
Correct. And the fact that their parents both served in the war together, so how they end up on Isabella Street is also revealed.
Okay. And then finally, one of my favorite authors, narrated by one of my favorite narrators. It's like a trifecta.
And these two have worked together before. We're talking about So Far Gone by Jess Walter and read by Edoardo Ballerini. And they have worked together before. In fact, The Angel of Rome we did on this program a few years back. And Edoardo gets him. Edoardo Ballerini really gets Jess Walter. This is a satire. And satire is not easy. And yet I think he just rises to the occasion. And one thing we have to be very clear about, the novel's setting is the region. And the region is kind of where I live. It's north of where I live, Spokane and northern Idaho and British Columbia. So it's that triangle. And, in that triangle, there have been and still are some very fundamentalist folks who are angry and living off the grid and very susceptible to religious fundamentalism and craziness. And this is the story. What is really fun and what people like you and I will and our listeners will enjoy, this is also a story of a former journalist. Somebody who was an environmental journalist named Rhys Kinnick. And Rhys Kinnick is a fascinating guy. He's a Thoreauvian who has gone off the grid and lived for like 7 years, an hour or so outside of Spokane, which is, outside of a smallish city, but it can be very solitary. And what has happened since he lives there is he has detached himself, and here's the theme, from his family. And the novel pretty much opens and gets going when his grandkids approach him and say, our mom is missing. And that is the through line that he's going to find his daughter and reconnect with his grandkids. And there's some violence and there's some craziness with the name of the right-wing organization is called AOL, Army of the Lord. And this is, of course, Jess Walter to a T. Clever use of words, AOL. The newsman also kind of reconnects with some people in his past. And there's some very funny stuff. There's a former policeman, and what we'll hear is Kinnick and the former policeman who are actually going up to the redoubt where the AOL people are to get the grandkids back. The former policeman is a kind of a hyperactive former cop named Littlefield, and that's what we will hear.
All right, let's listen to it. This is So Far Gone by Jess Walter, read by Edoardo Ballerini.
Kinnick had never seen someone drive the way Chuck Littlefield piloted this extended cab Chevy Silverado pickup. Perched forward as if bellied up to a bar, steering with his left forearm, which he draped over the wheel, his head snapping left, then right, then left again, like a driving squirrel, zipping between lanes and speeding between intersections. Any space between cars seemed to offend him.
Of course, it's great writing, and it is great narration. Edoardo just gets Walter. He's narrated most of his books, not all, but most of them. Littlefield, the change in narration when Littlefield takes over, because I've been listening to this, is just extraordinary. I mean, he's like a shapeshifter.
He really is,
Edoardo, in the way he can do this.
I found that so not only believable but long lasting. As the audiobook, you just thought, how did he go from this sort of very literary environmentalist guy who's now been living off the grid? So he's not, he's not up to the speed of the current world. He doesn't know how to work a cell phone. He's really, kind of being dragged in to how we live now. And yet, and with this very hyper former cop who wants to give him a gun, and it's a fascinating thing. But there is some darkness in this satire too. There is some damage that is done, and
well, that's what I actually wanted to ask you about. So, is that disconcerting? Because it is. The New York Times describes it as a caper. It's satirical, so there's a lightness in tone, but then there are violent scenes. So what did you think about it? Was it disconcerting for you?
They really weren't, because the way he writes them, they're very logical, and they're also kind of accidental. In one of the scenes where Rhys Kinnick is saved from a horrible interaction with one of the Armies of the Lord people, his buddy does a shot that just in real life could never have happened, but that's why fiction is so much fun, where he hits the guy in the arm. So he doesn't kill him, but he maims him and he gets him to stop this horrible scene. I mean, the satire is never far. There are two sort of scenes of violence with the same sort of characters, but you shouldn't promote it as it's not violent, because there are violent scenes, and they are, but they work well because, like I say, that Walter just has an eye for this stuff.
And Ballerini can just deliver, period. He's amazing. Okay, so those are our 3 books on family issues, and there'll be links to all 3 books in our show notes. So you can find them there. Alan, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and it was fun today.
Yes, and I'll talk to you next month. Take care.
I look forward to it.
Follow Behind the Mic wherever you get your podcasts. Truly, it does help people to find us. Support for Behind the Mic comes from Blackstone Publishing, an independent, award-winning publisher of best-selling books and audiobooks. Find your next great listen at blackstonepublishing.com. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart, Robin Whitten, Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dow and Coco McCracken are our editors. And the music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. And I'm your host, Jo Reed. Good listening.